You're ready to be premature all over again.
Wow, that's impressive.
Quick
bro.
reset.
Yeah.
Quick reset.
Last night was Ramos Jizz.
Freudian slip.
Who knew the job was pro bono?
I was so high that I shit myself at some point.
Okay, get still here. Somebody, everybody mute. Goddamn you.
My SEAL Team 6 with the SEAL Team 12.
There's nothing wrong with punching above your weight.
I thought you'd get better.
Well,
I don't know what's worse. You're a ginger or you've been vaccinated.
You sit around and drink and solve the world's problems, right?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Season 3 is here. It is week 2. The train is not stopping. We are plowing ahead. We are fortunate enough to have the man, the myth, the legend of the Haas Nest Monster. Haas is back in the studio. Los Cuatros Jinetes are whole once again. We missed you last week, brother. We're glad you're back in the studio. How is everybody doing?
Just a crazy motherfucker, living it up, not giving a fuck, living life in the fast lane. Like I said, it's going to be every episode. I'm committed to the bit.
That's it. You're just doing it. You're going to ride that horse.
Committed to the bit.
That's why you're
I'm a method podcaster.
Somebody's got to be. It might as well be you.
We don't need no water. Let the motherfucker burn. Yeah,
burn,
sure
motherfucker,
Burn.
Yeah, glad everybody's here. It is week 2 of season 3. It's hard to believe. You know, we're here. We are in season 3. Who knew? Wait, we did. We talked about this in our 100th episode. If you haven't listened to it, go back and do it. We knew. We felt it. It was there.
There's some real gems in that episode.
There are.
You
There are.
will
Some
probably
real-
have to take it
Real
in
Easter
chunks,
egg type
Yes.
things if you're into that stuff.
But yes, thank you, gentlemen, for joining me once again. Here we are. I don't want to waste any time. Haas, we're glad you're back. Super excited about this episode.
Sorry, I wasn't here. Missed you
hey,
guys.
Man, you know, you got to do what you do.
Yeah.
Family comes first. And
It's hard to get up for Friday nights when I don't get to see y'all's faces every week.
I know,
you know?
it's got to be tough.
Yeah, it's a good thing they make
We know
a
what
pill
you
for
mean.
that now.
That's
so
it.
you're
That's
good.
All right, so let's jump into our drinks. Mac, you were first in the studio, so I'm going to let you go first today, brother, because you were here patiently waiting before the other gentleman got here. So what are you drinking today?
So I went back to the Screwball whiskey, the peanut butter whiskey again. You know, I last week did the Reese's peanut butter with it.
Yes.
This week followed the recommendation of the gentleman at the package store down in Georgia, where I purchased it, and also purchased the blackberry liqueur to go with it that he recommended. So basically, just a 1-for-1 Screwball whiskey and the blackberry liqueur to make a peanut butter and jelly drink, and it's pretty darn good. It's a little sweet. But it does have some good flavor to it, and it does kind of harken back to that, maybe crustless or with crust, however you preferred your peanut butter and jelly sandwich as a child.
With crust. It's just a waste of fucking bread to cut that shit off.
Just because your mom wouldn't cut the crust off for you.
Or the circle ones you can
With crust.
So I will throw this out there. For Little Mac, we used to have the cookie cutters, and we would make star peanut butter and jelly sandwiches or a whale peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I'm okay with admitting that.
You're a big baller.
Well, don't lie. You still make those motherfuckers. You know you do.
I do.
I would.
What I should do is try and make like a Jello out of this and make it in that shape.
Ooh.
That would work.
That would be yummy.
Okay.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's really good. I would do this again, and it's good because I have a lot of this liquor left.
PB&J. PB&J in a cup with a little ice. There you go.
Yep.
All right. I will go next. Mac, thank you so much for your PB&J. I will go next. I just sent it to you guys. I don't know if you'll be able to view it or not. It was an Instagram recipe. It got sent to me, so I thought I would try it. And it is called Brazilian lemonade. Now, takes a little effort to make it. So you put water in a blender, you quarter up a couple of limes, you throw them in the blender, you pulse it a few times just to chew up the limes, it kind of express that lime juice out of it. Then you strain it. With that, I also put 5 tablespoons of sugar, give it a little sweetness. Okay, blend that up. Then I strain it. Then I put the liquid back in the blender, and I add a half can of condensed milk. So sweetened condensed milk. Blend that up. So that's Brazilian lemonade by itself. So the recipe I sent you, that's all it's going to give you. And I thought, I tasted, I was like, God damn, this is really good. I'm going to mix it with alcohol. and this is going to be a spirited debate. Brazilian lemonade. So I took some Reposado, some Terramana Reposado tequila. Thank you to The Rock. I appreciate you once again. And I put in 3 ounces of Reposado tequila, put it in a shaker with this I say pre-made because I made it ahead of time, shook it up and over some ice, poured it in my glass. And Mac, like I said, this is what looks like a quart of jizz in a glass right now.
Jizz relax.
Just relax. That's it. Don't worry. I am.
Is that for Ramos?
Yes, this is Ramos's jizz. And it is a Brazilian lemonade a la a spirited debate. So it is our version of the Brazilian lemonade. And I sent you the recipe in case you want to try it. I know it's some effort, so I know you probably won't. But fuck it. Maybe you will.
No, it sounds good.
So,
It is. It's actually very tasty.
Yeah, I want to ask the question.
It sounds muito bem, you might
Thank you.
say.
I don't know what that means, but gracias.
Very good.
Okay.
Being the method podcaster that you are, did you go full Brazilian when you made the Brazilian drink?
Oh, it's a landing strip. Oh, yeah.
Oh, did you just a little landing strip? Just for like a little Cessna, maybe? Just a tiny plane.
Yes, a little puddle jumper.
That's it. So that's what I'm having. The Brazilian lemonade a la a spirited debate. So that's me. Grinch, what about you, brother? You are next in the studio. What are you having today?
Yeah, honestly, just based on the weather and how things were going and the topic, I just wanted a beer today.
Really?
So I'm drinking.
Did you pay $12 for that beer?
Well, that's actually the setup to that was going to be, water's so fucking expensive. I may as well drink some beer. Yeah.
Fuck that up. Shit.
$4 water? Hell no. So yeah, it's our New England IPA, and it's good.
I'm not a
Easy
fan
strength.
of IPAs, man. They're a little bitter
I'm
for
not
me.
either.
Yeah,
Okay.
you feel a little too hoppy for me.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, same.
a New England IPA,
break it down
people
for us.
use the term juicy. It's got more of that component to it, whereas with a standard IPA, you get like more of that just straightforward bitterness.
Be real careful. Be real careful where we're going here.
I need
to know if it's moist.
These are not accidental words.
It's not moist.
It's juicy.
It's
Does
subliminal.
it squirt out of the can?
It's subliminal.
Your juicy beer in my glass. That's
Still
Ramos
not a
jizz.
talent. It's still not a talent. I don't care what anybody says.
So you are just having a New England IPA.
Yes, sir.
There you go. Hey, beer is super simple.
Hey,
when water's $4 and beer's $4, you
Right.
dump it to beer.
And the whole attitude of like the frat culture, the toxic culture was like, slam as many of these in your face as you can. Now get in there, boys.
Yeah, it wasn't going to be with that beer you held up, right?
I was going to say,
No.
let's be honest. It was not going to be a fancy Southern Pines.
It was
beer.
Budweiser.
Beer.
We saw the
Yeah.
pictures.
That's right. Bud Light, Budweiser, Coors. Yeah, it wasn't going to be that shit. That's got some class to it. So I appreciate you bringing it to the studio. All right, Haas, you last into the studio. You're bringing up the caboose, which, you're probably apt to do on Friday nights, bringing up the rear. So what are you drinking today?
Water.
Got to do what you got to do.
You're
Well,
not. I've already seen it.
I mean, it's colored water. It's flavored water.
Brown
There's
water.
water in it.
It's aged for 6 years. Water.
It's water that sat in a porta potty for 3 days.
I've been thinking about drinking this again for a while. This is the second bottle I've been able to find here. So I went back to the old Bibb and Tucker, 6-year aged Bibb and Tucker. If you haven't had it, it's very smooth.
Have you
For
been
90
fortunate?
for 92 proof, it's nice
bad.
and smooth. No bite. Yeah.
Have you been fortunate enough to find when we had the Duke on? Were you fortunate enough to find it was the gin he was drinking? It was Spanish gin or something?
I did.
Like that? Oh, you
I did Nordis gin.
Oh,
I did find it and I've tried it.
Oh, really?
Mhm.
Ordered it for yourself or tried it out somewhere?
The pub I go to has some.
No
My
shit.
favorite pub, the pub that's like 100 yards from the flat
Okay.
had some, so I tried it before I ordered it. It's a little too floral for me.
you.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
kind of, for me, it kind of tasted like I was drinking flower water. Like, there was flowers in a vase. They sat there for a while. Someone took them up, put them in upside down, sat there for a while, took it out, and then drank the water.
Poured some ice in and said, "Here you go."
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't okay. I'm being a little melodramatic. It wasn't that bad. It was good. It was decent. But it was definitely not Monkey 47 or Botanist for my palate. So I will gladly grab as many bottles of it as I can and bring it back for the Duke. For Duke,
Can I ask how you drank it?
you can have all of them. I tried it straight up at first,
Okay.
just so I could enjoy the flavors, and then my typical gin and tonic.
Okay.
But I asked them to put no mint or cucumber or lime in it because I wanted just to have it with the tonic. I didn't want the flavors to get jacked up.
That makes sense. And trying it by itself was obviously going to be intelligent because then you're going to know the flavor profile.
Yeah, I tried that first. And like I said, it was good, but it wasn't, for me, it wasn't all it was touted to be, which is fine. I mean, different palates, different folks. Yeah. So, I mean, like I said, it's more for him. He shouldn't be mad that I don't like it because I drink so much.
Right.
He should be happy that I don't like it so I can bring him a case back. Because I'm working on, that's a new skill, keystring a case. So, yeah.
I
apologize, Haas.
I apologize too. I didn't. I sent it not expecting everybody to start noticing
watching it right then.
Watching it right then. Because I was, as soon as you said what you said, Haas, I was like, there's got to be a porta potty cocktail.
I already know.
And of course, what do I find? The Jackass cocktail Supremo de Pupo.
Yeah, it's just wrong.
Thanks. Is this an ass mirror video you sent out?
No one did that. You put like a Snickers bar in the middle of it or something.
Baby Ruth.
Or Baby Ruth. That's it.
All right, I'm gonna have to.
The fun size ones is ice cubes, so they're just floating.
Freeze them. You could get away with that.
Yeah, you could actually.
So my apologies, Austin.
Thank you. All right, let's move on. So there's our drinks. Obviously, cheers to you, gentlemen. Haas, cheers. Thank you for being back.
Fellas.
Another good show.
Missed you as always.
All right, let's go ahead.
Just a little bit sadder. No, it's a lot sadder when I don't get to see you guys. Yeah,
we agree.
When I
we
don't
agree.
see you guys.
100%.
Fucking sucks.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into our topic. The Four Horsemen are here. We're excited. Let's get it on. So, as of late, recently, there was a documentary released to Netflix, and it was called Trainwreck, and it documents the 3-day festival of Woodstock '99, the Trainwreck that it was. There is also another documentary that came out in 2021 on HBO in their music box, Woodstock '99, Peace, Love, and Rage, and it also it's a single documentary, an hour and 50-minute documentary where Trainwreck was broken up into 3 episodes, 3 parts. The Peace, Love, and Rage documentary was 1 2-hour block about the festival and all of the issues with the festival. And we thought, you know what, at our age, 99, we were all in that 23, 24. It was the demographic set for us. I mean, it was geared towards us. So we thought this would be a good time. Wanted to come on, wanted to talk about it, look at a lot of the issues that were surrounding it, from the profiteering, the lack of logistics, the band issues, the promoters issues, the what did you say when you're talking about your beer, Grinch? The college frat boy mentality issues. Yeah. And all of that,
the lack of water issues, the lack of personal hygiene,
the issues. Shit mud that they swam around in.
And the theme of this package the different way, which was a question posed to me by one of my coworkers, was, how can you have a festival with however many thousands, hundreds of thousands of people there with barely any issues, yet this one went so far off the rails? And my response was, if you watch this documentary, you'll understand. Because it answers that very question.
It answers it multiple times without even really trying, right? Like, I mean, it's clear that the 2 guys running it didn't give 2 fucks about anybody but themselves and the money they're in.
Can I ask a quick question?
And partying with rock stars.
Before we descend, Matt, give me a second. Can I ask a question? No. Grinch, what festival were they referring to you when they asked you that question?
Nothing in particular, but if you think of like Rockfest or Hellfest or Wacken or some of these massive festivals that are in Europe and other locations that have been pulled off successfully. Now, I mean, okay, yeah, and just the other day there was a festival, I think maybe in Spain, where they had like a huge wind event that caused deaths. That's not the same thing. That's kind of an unexpected environmental situation
that you can't plan for.
Yeah, and I'm not necessarily just hand waving that off of liability, but it's not really the point.
Look, the point is there's things you can control and there's things you can't control. There's things you can plan for and there's things you can't plan for. I think that's the distinction here, right?
Right. And I guess that was the question I wanted to ask is, was there a specific festival they were citing? Because clearly occurring in '99, every festival since then, like that becomes the cautionary tale for any festival you put on since then. So of course it's easy to go, well, other festivals don't have that issue. Yeah, no shit. Because the year that Coachella came out right on the heels of this one, There were no issues. Why? They gave away free water. I mean, they took a lot of what the issues from this one, and they said to eradicate those, this is how we need to approach it. That's what they did. So, I mean,
I agree.
Okay.
I mean, I agree. And I know that's the whole point of what we're here to talk about today. And sorry, Mac, I know we cut off your question,
yes.
but the details are the very specific details related to this event are what made it so tragic, you know, as opposed to, well, we just didn't think about. And, you know, and Haas, you just said this, like you planned for it. And then there's we just didn't think about. And then there's, you set these conditions and then you acted shocked when it happened because you simply didn't understand the situation you were creating.
Well, and you know what drove me up the fucking rails is they didn't even really act like shocked. They acted dismissive.
They took no responsibility
and like tried to shift responsibility. I mean, the whole thing with Limp Bizkit and Fred Durst, right? Like, I mean, you can't blame him. Well, yeah, you can. There can be shared responsibility, right? But you should be looking at yourself first, right? Like you are the person that puts this on and plans it and controls it. So you determine what happens or doesn't happen.
Amen.
I know Mac's got a thought there.
Sorry,
Go,
yeah,
I
gotta breathe for a minute.
And I gotta get it out before I forget about it.
Do it now.
So I think, you know, Haas, you touched on something there, right? Where you said, you know, you can't blame, or you said you could blame Limp Bizkit to some extent. I don't know that you can, because I think they touched on it, and I'll bring back to the point I was going to make here in just a second. They touched on it in the show, right? Limp Bizkit was what Limp Bizkit was, right? They were not making up anything, right? The guy's a jackass.
Yeah.
And the band is, you know, their music is full of rage. So, you know, you can't even remotely start to try and blame him because you booked that act.
Well,
you should have vetted that. And so my bigger point being that when they put this festival together, nobody looked at it from a lineup standpoint and said, wow, this is a Woodstock lineup.
Yeah.
This was not a Woodstock lineup from top to bottom.
And the kind of people that it was bringing in, I mean, there was some, right? Like there was Willie Nelson, and Jewel,
there was
and in some
Willie
cases,
Nelson,
Bush, right? But,
you know,
Jewel.
But this was not. I mean, this was a metal festival. If you look at the lineup and compare it to other lineups like from '94 and '69, this was not your peace, love, and hippiness festival by any stretch of the imagination.
Exactly. I mean, exactly. And I think that's a critical point to all this in terms of the biggest point, which was,
right.
I think John Sherry even said, we booked the biggest acts
of the day. Right.
And I get it as a producer, you're proud of the fact you pulled that off, right? I mean, if you said strip away everything you might know about Woodstock 99 and just showed that lineup, you're like, and just randomly walked up to somebody, I'd be like, holy shit, how did you get all those bands together, right? But back to the whole thing that was mentioned and multiple times was they pulled off 99, but it didn't make a lot of money.
No, 94.
And they kept
94.
or 94, and they kept saying because the fences came down and people didn't pay. I find that hard to believe based on how much they were charging for all the other bullshit. But that aside, it's suggested to me that they said, we're going to take steps to ensure we're going to make a profit. We're going to make a profit.
And not just that, but they're going to
game.
squeeze every red cent from every freaking corner they possibly can.
Yeah.
I mean,
but hold on.
To the opposite extreme.
Well, one thing that I'd like to bring up, though, on that is, and I'm not condoning, right, what they did. You know, $8 for burrito. I think they said in one of the episodes, $4
for all our listeners. You need to keep in mind this was 1999, right? Like this isn't today's prices. This is 23 years ago's prices. I mean, look, $8 for a burrito today. I don't think anybody would necessarily blink that if it's a quality burrito, right? But I mean,
but if you went to one of those shows, or you went to, you know, a concert or anything like that, you're going to expect to pay a premium.
You expect some price gouging, sure,
for what you're getting. The problem I had, I think, to some extent, was that they were creating a market for themselves, right? They knew the weather's going to be shit. It's going to be hot. We're on an old military base. There's going to be, these people are going to be standing on asphalt and tarmac. And guess what? We want you to come out and camp for 3 days, but you can't bring in any water or any food or anything like that.
You can bring drugs.
So,
they weren't confiscating
that's
drugs.
okay. Yeah, that's okay. But so they were creating the market for themselves, which I think is where
You know why though? Because drugs are supposed to make people compliant
And thirsty.
How'd that work out?
and thirsty and
But
hungry.
Piling on to that, Mac. I mean, I think that's another key facet of this was it wasn't any one particular thing other than the overarching greed.
Right.
It was the series of decisions. And I was telling the missus, I don't even know if they still do it. There used to be a series on like History Channel called Engineering Disasters. And as you watched it, it was not one thing that was blatantly obvious you could just fix. It was like these little human decisions,
small chinks in
maybe with a malfunction or something that just compounded the problem. Even like if you watch the story of Chernobyl, it's amazing that it happened. It is like it shouldn't have happened, but hubris and some other things contributed to a series of decisions that ultimately just led to catastrophe.
Right.
And to me, that's how I kept looking at this thing was, okay, all right, we found the location. I didn't have any problem with the location. They kept saying on asphalt. I'm like, yeah, it's a giant facility. Right. It makes perfect sense to me.
It makes sense to me as well. If they had taken into account the weather and whether or not, and the heat coming off of that, like if you allow people to bring in your own water or you have more water stations or something like that, I totally get it.
Well,
you can't bring in your own beer. That's fine. You can't, you can bring in some food, but to not let them bring in water and expect them to camp out for 3 days and then charge them, you're asking to overwhelm your facilities, overwhelm your support staff, which, as we all
free water,
but that's
minimum.
Exactly the logic.
Well, they did offer free water until, all that water became tainted and they started busting pipes. And, I'm sure we'll touch on this. At what point do we look at the sense of entitlement of these people to then, say, well, we're upset, so we're going to start destroying everything.
All right. So let's stop here. Let's stop here. No, not a Grinch. Let's stop here because this is season 3 and I'm going to take better control. And I apologize to all our listeners. In the past, things have just been a runaway train. So there are going to be 3 key elements I want to focus on. We're going to do them in order. All right. Professionalism. Grinch said last week.
I got the syllabus. I got it.
Okay. So there are going to be 3 key elements. First, the promoters and their culpability. We'll talk about them, all of the things related to them, but as it relates to promoters. Second is going to be the bands. Haas, I fucking went through everybody until I got to Haas. Haas, you said that you can blame the band. So we're going to talk about it from a band's perspective. Are they culpable? Do they have a responsibility in their position being on stage from a control of the crowd issue? And then third, the audience. Okay. And what was their level of responsibility in terms of going there and how they behaved and things of that nature. So that's where we're going to start. We're going to start with promoters, and the promoters are going to cover obviously John Scher, who was head of promoting this thing, coupled with the founder, Michael Lang. Those two almost exclusively. We'll talk about those promoters, but also the vendors that were responsible in terms of the price gouging and profiteering. Okay. So we're going to start there, and then we will discuss the bands and then the audience themselves. So let's start with just the promoters. You guys mentioned the infrastructure. Griffiths Air Force Base. It had closed down. It had been shut down in Rome. They lost between 4,000 and 6,000 jobs, something like that.
Yeah. I think you said like 4,500. Yeah. So anyway, it's a lot. It affects the community.
So the mayor thinks this is a perfect opportunity to get an infusion of money back into the area by agreeing to put this festival on here. And from an infrastructure standpoint, you go, it's an Air Force base. They're going to have facilities. They're going to have buildings. They're going to have big open areas. Yes.
They had a hospital, right? I mean, they had,
some covered by asphalt. They had huge hangars where they could house things in the hangars and things of that. They used the air traffic control tower on the base as an observation deck for people to be able to do. What is that supposed to mean? What's going on here? we are staying in our lane. I'm in control. I'm driving the fucking bus.
Baby is in the corner.
That's it.
Nobody provided me any water. I'm
So,
burning this damn thing down.
I don't know what to tell you. You burn whatever you
I
want
was
down.
gonna
It's not
say.
going to affect me. You do what you got to do, bro. Break shit.
Oh, okay.
So by all accounts, looking at how 94 had gone, Grinch, because what you said, like basically in the Socrates, New York, in an open field where there was really no infrastructure, it was just a fence they put up that was able to be taken down and people could just walk in. So yes, they said, we want this to be profitable. We're going to use this Air Force base. There's like an 8-mile wall around it. And so it was enclosed by default, and they thought this is a perfect way to prevent what happened in 94, assuming the weather is in our favor, because in 94 it rained. Everything should be good from a logistical standpoint. Now it's a matter of booking bands, booking vendors, selling tickets, and we're off to the races, right? For all intents and purposes, that's what they're looking at. I mean, it's one of the reasons Michael Lang partnered with John Scher, because he's like, we can pull this off. And they had I imagine, a vision that they thought this is going to work this time. What I thought was interesting about the Netflix documentary from the production standpoint is how many of the production staff were like, right out of the gate, no, we do not need to do this. Like, they were like, this is a bad idea because of what happened in 94.
Yeah. No, I thought that was really interesting as well. And, maybe it's from, I think all of us probably by our ages now have a touch point of this. When you start getting a vibe from the people who are kind of in the weeds, in the trenches that make stuff happen, and their antennas start perking up to go, ooh, that was definitely, I know it's hindsight, right? I know the interview was hindsight, but I didn't get the impression that was like made up after the fact. It felt like they knew, like, holy cow, are we really going to do this?
Well, and I think one of the individuals who was, and I cannot think of his name for the life of me, but he mentions in the Netflix documentary, they're sitting in the room with Michael Lang and John Scher and going down the list of bands that they've booked, and he's like, look, you guys aren't in touch with these bands, right? I know who you're booking, and this isn't going to end well. And they, he said, I basically got the impression to, shut the hell up, don't open your mouth.
Yeah.
So it was like they were going to move forward with what they thought would sell the most tickets and make the most money, and package it as Woodstock, even though it wasn't.
Right. You're referring to Lee Rosenblatt, the assistant site manager, who at the time in 99 was 22 years old. So he was our age, and perfectly situated to understand who the bands were that they were trying to book.
And he's the one at the end that said it comes down to one word. And Grinch talked about this earlier. It came down to greed.
Right.
Greed. Yeah.
100%.
Right. And
like, I mean, a blind, half-witted person could watch this and realize that that's what it was about.
And I think this relates to the producers, right? Because it, on top of the actions we'll continue to unpack, their approach to the band suggested there was no peace, love, and happiness.
That's the point I wanted to make.
Guiding light, right? It never was.
Really, Korn.
Yeah, Limp Bizkit, Rage Against the Machine.
Rage Against the Machine.
I mean, right there in the name, Rage.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
You look at 94, and I won't go back to 69 because I wouldn't recognize a whole lot of the bands probably. But if you look at the 94 lineup, the heaviest bands there that I would consider would be 9 Inch Nails, Metallica,
Cypress Hill.
And I wouldn't consider them, though. Their following, though, is not a Rage following.
Oh, no, not a Rage following. No,
I'm just talking about in terms of like heavy metal.
Okay,
kind of that letting that out. You're looking at 9 Inch Nails, Metallica, maybe the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Green Day. Those were the heaviest bands in 94 as far as like what I would consider heavy metal or rock metal. And I think we all know that they're not Limp Bizkit, they're not Korn, they're not Kid Rock, right? Those bands just elicit a whole nother era or kind of mindset from people when that music comes on.
Right.
And I'm not moving to the bands yet, but I'm just in the sense of I do hang on to that key point that they've just wanted the biggest bands. They didn't really understand the lineup, and there was no guiding moral compass to that in terms of what message they wanted to convey and the atmosphere they wanted to create. I mean, they would have maybe hard pressed to convince me otherwise. I just don't think they gave a shit about that.
No,
I don't think they gave a shit about that.
You had people that were out of touch, right? That's I think the bigger key too, right? With the acts they were booking, like you said, Grinch, they were booking acts that were the biggest acts at the time that would sell the most tickets and put the most people in that field.
Right. And at the time
they weren't trying to promote any sort of cohesive, peace, love, kumbaya. They just wanted a bunch of people in there. And then when it went bad and it went south, they basically said, well, it's all the band's fault. Well, you booked the bands.
They were going to lay it at somebody's feet, and it wasn't going to be
Right.
their own. They made sure of that. 1999, when this was put on, the ticket price for the 3-day weekend was $150 for an advance ticket. If you bought it at the door, it was $180. And if we say all of them were advance tickets, we know they weren't. 400,000 attendees were there during the course of the weekend. That's $60 million they made if everybody bought a $150 ticket.
Yeah, I read the equivalent would be, I don't know, I didn't do this math myself, but it said the equivalent of that price would be almost $270 today.
Yes.
Yes. If you look at, had they actually put in place the infrastructure that they really needed to, as far as garbage cleanup, proper running water, obviously you're looking at a festival, you need to have, a shower area for people to shower for 3 days. Working, I know they're going to be porta potties, but working toilets.
Have any of you guys ever been to a 3-day festival?
No.
I have. It was a rock festival in Vegas, but you didn't stay there overnight.
Okay.
But these people would be saying they were expected to stay overnight.
I mean, the comment
I
was going to make is putting people in tents does not make them hippies,
Right.
No.
Well, I think of, because I used to live close to Bonnaroo, so I think of Bonnaroo, right?
Yeah.
Now here, not far from here, they have Nova Rock, where
Yeah,
you can actually rent like little cabins. I tried talking the wife into that.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry to interrupt, man, because I was just thinking,
No,
have
go
any
ahead.
of us actually had that experience? Because you're talking about, making sure that the right infrastructure and logistics were in place. And I was thinking, well, have any of us actually experienced that?
We went to the Maryville Fall Festival in Tennessee there one time.
To see
but we
Train.
just went to see Train. Don't judge me.
I know. Look, I know. That's why I said it. Wasn't making fun of you.
We were only there for one day. But, I don't know that they had people camping out there per se. I don't recall seeing any of it, but they had a pretty good infrastructure in place as far as, they had parking set up, they had people busing you in, so it worked pretty well for the, now granted, I'm not comparing the Maryville Fall Festival in Maryville, Tennessee
to
Woodstock by any stretch of the imagination, but
but sticking with the producer lens of
Aspect,
this. Yeah. I mean, I still go back to say, I have zero issue with the facility.
Yeah, exactly.
If you just said decision one, find facility, I would have said we're go at the station. Let's move to the next things. Right.
Yeah. I don't think the facility was the problem so much as the infrastructure at the
well,
facility.
that's exactly where I'm going with it is when I was saying it was certain decisions along the way that continued to set the conditions, because backing up and staying within the framework of the syllabus, if you said producers, bands, and attendees,
audience,
all those unto themselves aren't necessarily the problem, right? There's a lot to unpack with each one, but it was the setup and then the culmination. Because I mean, I could see as if the producer, if you said I've got 400,000 people, I can't move 400,000 people in and out every day, not without some huge logistics in place to facilitate that. If I expect my attendees to be leaving and coming back every day. So you almost kind of take off the board the traffic aspect, which now leads to everybody's on site, which also means there's no release. There's no reset and refresh. You're not showering.
Right.
You're in
you
this
have to
pressure
provide
cooker.
those facilities.
There's no escape valve.
There's no escape valve, right? So you're bottling this thing up from day one. And now, like I said, I kept hearing the asphalt. I get it. It's an environmental condition that contributed to the heat, but it wasn't the problem unto itself.
They weren't on asphalt when they were at the the different stages, right?
I think technically on concrete, but that drove me crazy just because whatever.
Well, but they were on a field at that point, right? So they were only on the tarmac, concrete, whatever you want to call it, when they were walking around,
transitioning between
now,
facilities.
Is that still
hangars.
absorbing heat? Yes, absolutely, and it's got to be dispersed somewhere.
Right.
When you put 250,000 people together in that small of a space, you're going to have body heat. Just in and of itself is going to be a problem.
Right.
But one other thing I think we should touch on from a producer standpoint potentially, and we're talking about infrastructure, is security.
Peace what was it?
Peace Patrol.
Peace Patrol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if
you
you
talk about a crock of shit.
Right.
Let's put a bunch of people out in the middle of nowhere, not provide them proper,
training,
water or shelter,
facilities,
or
whatever,
food, or
and then hire 18-year-olds.
Right. Hire a bunch of 18-year-olds, not give them ability to be able to communicate with each other, or detain people, or at least deter people. Like,
well,
I mean, come on.
But from a producer mindset, that still focuses on them. They just didn't think that would be a thing.
Right.
They wanted.
Well, I'm not sure I
the
believe
thinnest
that,
amount of security to pull the event off is what they wanted.
Well, they wanted the thinnest amount of everything to pull the event
off.
Right.
I thought the one gentleman, I could go and find his name. I thought he was hysterical. The Peace Patrol guy was like, I was 18 years old. I'm wearing this yellow shirt.
He sold a shirt.
Somebody comes up to me and goes, what does that get you? He goes, everything. I can go backstage, whatever. He goes, I'll buy it for $400. He goes, I sold it to him, went to my bag and got another shirt.
Look,
and he made almost as much selling this shirt as he did getting paid to be there.
Was it just me, or did that remind us of a friend of ours from the past with the Brooklyn accent? I'm just going to throw that out there.
Same.
But I mean, I think when you have that many people, and I want to say in that small of a space, obviously it's an airfield, right? It's a big space, but you're putting that many people there. You have to have some sort of, and I get it. Michael Lang was like, oh, we didn't want the government state, being in there, whatever, But it goes back to you weren't doing the peace, love, and happiness at this point.
Some of the answers, especially some of the answers that Michael Lang gave, I felt like were rehearsed legal answers. Well, he was a douche, but what was the other guy? John
Scherer.
Man, I think when I hopped in the call, Grinch was giving a sentiment that I wholeheartedly agree with.
Yeah. Which
was what? That guy can do what? Grinch?
Rot in a flaming porta potty of hell.
Yeah. For eternity.
There has to be some, to some extent, there has to be some true form of security. Okay, maybe they're not the primary security, but you have to have some semblance. I want to say of adult presence, for lack of a better
officer.
Well, I mean, for lack of a better term, right? When your Peace Patrol is the same age or younger as your audience, crowd, that's just not going to work out.
I mean, it's a bit of beating a dead horse, but it just the key takeaways for me as it relates to security is, yes, I think every concert I've gone to, I haven't had anybody armed in front. Now there might be local police who are assuredly aware a concert's happening, right? Or your EMTs and others in the event there's an emergency. That's all normal. I didn't expect, I'm almost like, thank God there weren't armed security at this thing. It was the combination, again, of factors of, I just need some bodies. I'll do the bare minimum to give them some kind of training to check a block. I just want them loosely keeping this thing on the rails at the least cost possible. And oh, by the way, because of profits, I'm gonna take away all food and water, but ignore drugs in many cases. I know that's overstated. That probably wasn't literally how bad it was. But then you're going to create this entire ungoverned space throughout the facility of this tent village where God knows what happened. We just have anecdotal reporting of what the numbers were. It was probably worse.
Right. So I have a question for you, Grinch, then to touch on something that you said and clarify it. So you're saying that you would be a proponent of not having any form of armed security guards there? Or are you just saying, because I think I agree with you, right? Like when you're talking about down front, in front of the stage, people that are just kind of, holding the crowd back as best they can and pulling people over, right? Those don't need to be armed because it's chaos down there. But are you saying there should have been no armed security on site, period?
I wouldn't have.
Okay.
I mean,
that's interesting.
well, let's put it this way. Not in a position to have a
to be overrun.
forward function. Maybe you react to like reports of theft or assault, and now you have to have actual legal personnel, police in this case, involved.
But not there for continued crowd control.
Right. They're not. I mean, yes, and we've seen plenty of events where police are paid overtime to be there.
Right. They're
and
off.
By the numbers, it's a ratio of like thousands to one. You know, they're not.
What are they really going to do?
They're not going to keep event of that size on the rails. That's not what they're there to do.
Right.
They're there to deal with the one-offs, and just by virtue of being seen, convey that there is a security presence.
I think maybe I think just having the
let's be honest,
there is something.
At no time is a staff of 150, 250 people in charge of a crowd of 250,000 plus.
Right.
It all comes down to mob mentality and mindset and the psychology of the situation.
The question becomes, if you have that presence there, you know, and maybe they're not, you know, maybe it's not this huge presence.
Is it a
deterrent? Does it become a deterrent to prevent that mob mentality?
No.
Well, I mean, I think it can in the right circumstances. But one might say that the performers who are up there performing and inciting certain emotional responses from the crowd might have a responsibility.
Well, let me back up the security real quick, though, and just say it's a hypothetical question. It's not directed at you, Mac. It would be how many and where would you put them? And where the larger theory of this to what you were just saying, Haas, is in order to maintain control especially with a crowd of that size, you need to make them believe everything is in control.
Right.
And there will be consequence for an action.
That's why, and I think that's my thought process is they're not necessarily good. You know, look, if 250,000 people turn on you, I mean, you just let them burn the place down. I mean, you know, what are you going to do?
Ultimately, that's what happened. That's what they did.
Well, could they do? You know, could having a presence there, and it's all hindsight. We'll never know. Could have having a police presence or some sort of a security presence there helped kind of put people back in that mindset of, all right, well, I probably shouldn't start tearing this down because there are guys here, you know, that are adult figures that are armed and have a legal ability to arrest me should I do something like this. Now, granted, you know, at the point that it got to, those people were so far gone that they probably weren't thinking that straight anyway, I guess. So
no, but the problem is when you position this entire festival as peace, love, and music, placing an armed guard on the premises is going to be an issue.
The thing that kept rolling through my mind was expectations and accountability. Like, I mean, when I was being raised and the way we raised our kids was making sure they understood the expectations we had of them and then they were going to be held accountable. Well, neither one of those things were prevalent or present here.
But I think we'll get to that when we talk about the audience, I hope. Yes. The entitlement problem that occurred amongst the crowd. So go ahead, Thor.
Back to promote.
Keep us on track.
So we've discussed the douchebaggery of John Scher, Michael Lang, and their approach to this entire thing, where they dropped the ball in terms of who they were bringing to the table in terms of bands and understanding who those bands were, who their base demographic was of fans. Grinch, I'm going to harken back to what you said, that very frat boy culture, that mentality, the anger that they brought to the table, the Rage Against the Machine, the Kid Rocks. And then, you can sprinkle in a James Brown, a Jewel, Sheryl Crow, a Willie Nelson, and hope that it's going to, subdue the crowd, but it's not. I'm just not sure the lineup worked for what they wanted to accomplish, but it was, let's grab the biggest acts of the day, pull them all together in one place. And we've talked about this way back in season 1 in our concert versus festival debate. Was there is a benefit to bringing that many bands in a festival. That cross section allows audiences to see a lot of different music. For bands, it's great because they get to touch audiences they've never been able to reach before, and the hope that they then can expand their own audience base. But the other aspect of this was the vendor approach that promoters brought in and the profiteering. And I know you guys said at the outset, you were talking about, well, they wouldn't let you bring in water. Okay, we had vendors on site. And so they were supposed to pick up the shortfall there, right? Food, water, beer, whatever. Obviously, there was an issue. And by the end of the weekend, so many vendors were out of stock of stuff that other vendors were just charging exorbitant prices because they could afford to.
Well, and I think
nobody was keeping them in check.
The big point there was that was all outsourced. So there was no sort of regulation or oversight on what was being charged from a festival standpoint, which is a problem, right? I mean, if you say going into it, okay, water's going to be $4, plan accordingly, and that's what's charged the whole weekend, then that's fine. But like you said, when people start running out and it becomes a supply versus demand, well, why wouldn't you, if you're in the business of making money, why wouldn't you charge more?
Right.
And I mean, back to the producer and organizer. I mean, if you looked at it from the broad view, which is what they're supposed to be doing, they're supposed to be at kind of 30,000 feet making the big event happen. And then their staff is working through the details. It's a simple question. Somebody may have asked in the room, have said, hey, we've taken all their food. We have this many people who are staying on site multiple days. How many vendors do we have? What's the head count they can support? How often are they getting restocked? When does that happen? What happens if we have to do an emergency restock? Like, those are the kinds of contingencies and basic thoughts of human care that should have existed, right? Yeah. Just to pull off an event.
And I got the impression, though, and Grinch, you can, or anybody can correct me if I'm wrong. I got the impression, though, that they said, "All right, here's our vendors for food and water.
Capitalism.
We're done with that. We don't care."
All right, they washed their hands once they passed the buck. They washed their hands.
You guys are done with. We're done with that at this point. You guys do whatever you want. We've hired you. You're the experts. Have at it.
And the weird thing is, and I don't know how this works, and I can only assume that it is kind of, there are no checks and balances for this. But if you put on a show like Bank of America Stadium in Charlotte, right? Say it holds 70,000. You can only sell so many seats. Right. If you do it here in Tampa at Amalie Arena, you can only sell 19,000 seats. When you do an outdoor festival, I mean, 400,000 people, it's unlimited, right? And they're going, oh, well, $150.
Well, I mean, I have to presume the fire marshal or some government agency
emergency services,
right? They have to give you a number, I would think.
I would think so.
Well, or on the flip side, do you come back and say, well, we sold 400,000 tickets. We need you to ramp up for whatever support is required for that. I don't know. Maybe that's where the ball was dropped.
Yeah, right. You'd hope that would happen. But my guess is and I've never done this, so I may be 100% wrong, is what they did was they opened up, we'll call it contracts, to be bid on for spaces.
Right.
And so that contractor probably paid up front to get the space, and then it was all how much profit could they squeeze out over and above what they paid to get the spot.
Right.
So from their perspective, the calculus wasn't about, I've got to feed this many. It was, if I sell this much, I make this much.
Right. And if I sell above and beyond that, then that's just straight money.
They're just looking at profit margins at that point.
Let's not say sell. If I charge this much.
Okay.
They were, because they weren't worried about how much they sold. They were worried about what they could charge.
Right.
Well, I mean, it's a math problem, but it's still a math problem at the end of the day.
And what did Max say in episode 1 of season 3? Math is math, right? But what matters is criteria to form that equation. Just saying. All right, so what? Look.
I don't remember saying that.
But I'll take it.
That sounds too smart.
So we've looked at from the promoter's perspective. We have looked at the infrastructure. We've looked at booking the bands. We've looked at the vendors. All of those things in terms of where they dropped the ball, and they refuse to be culpable for any of responsibility. I mean, they were passing the buck, whether it was the asphalt aspect, whether it was the audience aspect, it was the band aspect, even the vendors that they hired. Oh, well, it was a vendor aspect. Yeah, fucker, you vetted them, you hired them. Clearly there should have been, or whether it was the Peace Patrol and the failure there. So let's move on.
Can we just say real quick,
if you
looked at the setting of those two when they did their interviews, Did anybody get the sense they're hurting financially?
No. In fact, it occurred to me multiple times how well off they are.
Yeah,
Probably mostly from that concert.
Michael Lang's not doing quite as well anymore. But
Well, he's dead.
Well, no, yeah.
You know,
Shortly after the documentary.
I think 3 months they said. So yeah.
All right, so we've looked at that.
Anyway.
So let's get to situation number 2, and maybe this will be a debate because Haas, you did come out of the gate with this one, and let's look at the artists that were hired to perform. And by all accounts, it's one hell of a list in terms of who they got for their big name bands.
Here's the most important takeaway, and I think I've said it once already, right? I don't think anybody's going to argue with the lineup they put together. They put together an amazing lineup.
They did.
What they didn't put together,
what supposedly is the theme.
What they did not put together was a Woodstock lineup.
Right.
Yeah.
To me, that's
else.
Yeah, you call it Rock Fest, you call it, Grinch's 2-day rock weekend. I don't care what you call it, but you can't call it Woodstock because that's not what those bands, that's not what they're promoting.
Right. Now, and so we're aware there was an East stage and a West stage on the property. The East stage was considered the main stage. And then there was a hangar where they had the rave hangar. So they were going all night, which is another factor when you think from a promotional standpoint. You're going all day. Oh, and by the way, we've got a rave hangar that's going to go all night. So you don't have to sleep if you don't want to.
Well, and I think we can touch on that when we hit the attendees and,
yes,
all of that, because that definitely impacts the way they behaved.
Right. So I'm just looking at the East stage. The East stage was considered the main stage. So any band that they brought in, if you're playing the East stage, right, that is the main stage. So Friday, opening with James Brown. Now, again, we're talking 1999, right? So James Brown, maybe a little out of his element in terms of the audience he's playing to, but a big name, but live.
That's the point of a festival, as we mentioned, right? Is bringing in those additional acts that you may not know.
Right. You had live DMX, Bush, Sheryl Crow, Korn, The Offspring. Those were on the East stage on Friday night. Saturday night, Counting Crows, Alanis Morissette, Metallica, Limp Bizkit, Dave Matthews Band, Kid Rock, Rage Against the Machine. And if you listened to our episode last week, you already know Metallica and Dave Matthews, 2 of the top 6 best-selling concert artists of all time. And they were both playing the main stage on Saturday night. And then, of course, closing out on Sunday, Willie Nelson, Everlast, Jewel, Red Hot Chili Peppers, Creed, Haas on the West stage. Seven Dust played on Sunday night, so for us, Rusted Root, Mike Ness from Social Distortion, Our Lady Peace, Collective Soul. I mean, they had a shit ton of bands, but the argument here to be made by the promoters was when shit started to go sideways. Friday, you had your issues. Korn took the stage. Korn was not the closer on Friday night, surprisingly enough. They were actually a fairly early act in the evening. But when they took the stage, the energy, the angst, the anger that the crowd kind of let out was kind of second to none. And Jonathan Davis, the lead singer of Korn, was interviewed, and he said it was fucking phenomenal. He goes, I was just wiped out at the end of my set.
Well, as an artist, if you go out there and you see 250,000 people staring back at you,
just waves of motion, and
they made a comment when they were talking about Limp Bizkit, where you're guiding 250,000 people, and they're doing what you tell them to do. You're moving them. That's got to be just. I mean, it's almost godlike.
Right. Which means, don't you have some responsibility to maintain crowd control?
No, I don't think that you do. I don't think that you do. And I'll say this because that's not your job. Your job is to put on now.
Okay. Hold on. I know where you're going. Your job is to put on the best performance that you're possibly supposed to give to the crowd. Yes, but those things aren't mutually exclusive. Why can't you put on the best performance that you're there to put on and not incite riotable behavior?
When you're a method band, you're committed to your craft.
Man, that's what they do.
Did you say method band or method?
When you're a method band, you're in method. We're trying to get the best out of them.
I knew this shit was going to come back.
Hold on.
Always coming back to haunt you.
God damn it, you motherfucker.
But yeah,
their job is to put on the best show that they can put on, because if they don't do that, the fans are going to be upset and feel like they were slighted. And let's be honest, you're looking at Kid Rock, Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit, Korn, and Jonathan Davis. And I don't know a lot about him, but the other 2 guys are fucking asshats.
I happen to love Limp Bizkit, so I mean, I'll make the argument right now. I'm a big fan.
No. I didn't say that I didn't like him. I just said Fred Durst was an asshat. Okay, big difference.
Yeah, I was going to say,
And I don't think
you
anybody
argue
would
against
argue with
that, Thor? Because I don't
Exactly.
think you can.
But if you're relying on them to be your voice of reason, you've lost control already.
Bro, I'm not saying you rely on them. I'm saying that, again, it comes down to expectations and accountability. And the fault and the blame doesn't lie squarely on the shoulders of Fred Durst or Limp Bizkit, right? I agree with that.
That's where they want to put it. But yeah,
what I'm saying is they do bear some responsibility. Fred Durst in particular, right? Because when you're controlling a mob, and you're the Pied Piper, and you have that ability, when you leave that mob into incital riot mob mentality, okay, legally speaking, causation, right? Links of a chain, right? If you are the closest link of causation to that event, you bear responsibility, legally speaking.
Look,
okay.
At the end of the day, the only time you can put legal and Fred Durst in the same sentence is if you're talking about taking his mugshot. He's not
when he's in
smart
trouble,
enough,
right?
He's not smart enough to think about anything like that.
But I think that was just a lack of understanding from the promoters about who they brought to the table.
That's it. Yeah. Well, you did not put and I'm gonna say it again. This was not a peace, love, and happiness festival.
No.
If you wanted to have a fucking rock show, which I think we all would have enjoyed,
right?
This was the lineup for you,
right?
But this
if
was
you were trying to tout peace, love, and music, this didn't work.
And to say we can't figure out why there was a mosh pit, well, because you brought on bands that generate mosh pits.
That's what they do exactly.
So,
I don't disagree with that. I think a majority of the responsibility falls on the shoulders of the promoters, 100%.
But I think with the bands is where I thought the Netflix special did a good job of connecting with the culture of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the anger that existed within that demographic. And then we already talked about pressure cookers there. There's no release. They're amped, right? I mean, we've all been amped. We know what it's like when we're stoked to see a band and you go into it ready to just go freaking bananas and run through a wall, figuratively. The key question of all of this is what got them to literally start running through walls and tearing down walls. Now, to me, with the bands, I do subscribe to the view of, I wonder on the one hand, they were in their own area. So I don't know how in tune to the conditions. Now, you feel the energy of a crowd, right? I can only imagine how empowering that is to just get on that stage. And I think what's her name from MTV talked about.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier. I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Where you were able, and I think they called it an orchestra. You were conducting them. That's no
dogs.
So, but yeah, I mean,
it's you don't become a rock star if you have those kinds of breaks necessarily to go. I know I can just bring it.
Right.
Or, well, I'd rather go down in history as the guy who knew when to pump the brakes. So back to you knew what they were, or you didn't, right? Or you didn't know what they were. And then you put them on the stage with all these conditions and power. And then you act shocked when it happened. That was the issue I took. And then in the HBO special, Moby fucking pissed me off. He pissed me off by saying, the troglodytes.
Right. He's using his 50-cent words.
Did you expect anything different from Moby?
He was upset that his name wasn't on the artist board. He didn't get to sign the board.
Well, it's interesting. I was reflecting on what Duke talked to us about when we said we don't understand how otherwise intelligent people can behave in such a way or vote for someone. And he said, in response to that, I've learned in my years, people always do something for a reason, even if we don't know what it is. But understanding it is important. I still don't know, like we have the benefit of hindsight, but I still don't know if we truly understood that anger that existed out in that crowd. Other than, let's just say, if you stripped away all the details and said, I'm going to give you a hypothetical. you take a college kid who probably doesn't have a ton of money, who loves these bands, who's been out in the heat for multiple days, put in animalistic conditions, and then you wonder why he acts like an animal.
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Multiple times in the documentary, Lord of the Flies was mentioned. Multiple times. And every single time I went, Nailhead, nice to meet. Right? Because that's exactly
because
what
I
it was.
just read that book in high school.
Yeah, maybe,
right?
maybe or maybe not. But I mean, I think it rings true to what Grinch is saying.
I think an important aspect, and maybe I missed this, and Thor, you mentioned, us being of kind of that age, what was the reason for the anger, right? You had the anger in the music. You had the anger in, the crowd, of the time, and they said, oh, well, it was just, it was the frat boy mentality. It was the anger. It was this. Why? I don't, and I'm trying to think back of what was going on that just made everybody so angry and feel the need to do that.
Well, I think I don't. The one VJ that was on there, I think she brought it up. I mean, back then, white college males, the demographic primarily that was listening to this music, had a certain sense of entitlement.
Well,
I mean, if you take the sense of entitlement that white males have now, and you roll that back 20-something years, I mean, you amplify it greatly. That makes sense.
And it came out in a more maybe grassroots level of more primal, because they were in a primal environment. They had been brought down to their base,
We're getting into audience. That's next.
We are.
Yeah, let's go back to bands. But again, there is some crossover there, right? Because when the band comes on, they're playing to their base. That audience is their base. So obviously, we're going to talk about those things.
Well,
yeah, clearly, most of those fans were not there to watch Jewel or Sheryl Crow. They were there for Korn.
My Venn diagram of connecting the bands to the audience was those bands brought that audience,
right?
And like anything, if you looked at the crowd and said, if you listen to Korn's lyrics of like the song like Thoughtless was in particular, I was thinking about of like, why the fuck you making fun of me? What the fuck you think you're doing to me? Like of being picked on. Those are the people who probably did the picking on, that were suddenly using that to justify what they were doing. But that whole band, that whole new metal movement was about being frustrated and angry at everything they saw, because they did a lot of time talking about, if you looked at the charts, it was so weird on TRL, which we know, back to the MTV, thanks for 11 years of music. Headbangers Ball had been relegated to what, like an hour or two on like a fucking Friday night at whatever time or whatever.
Like 3 a.m.
Yeah, it was Saturday.
But all day long, you get this pop shit jammed down your face, and then, oh, by the way, Korn is bumped out of the #1 spot by Britney Spears and NSYNC.
But there's a reason for that, though.
Which, by the way, the pop bands aren't still around and touring, but yet the rock and roll bands are, right? The metal bands are. Just saying.
You're never going to go broke catering to the lowest common denominator. That's why boy bands always. Right. I mean.
Because there's 5 people, there's one person that goes to every different group. You've got the sporty person, you've got the metal person.
You're thinking the Spice Girls.
Well, the point being, the Spice Girls just fucking called it out, right? I mean, they just said, this is sporty, this is posh, this is this, this is that. They didn't make any bones about it, right? But that's why those kind of bands, end up at the top of the charts, because they kind of appeal to everybody. Or a much larger base.
Right.
I mean,
one of the things I wanted to cycle back to, Grinch, sorry, I did want to cycle back before I forget, is making the connection between the bands and the audience is the artist compound. And when you see the documentary and they talk about the artist compound, they were flying in chefs and they were doing all day barbecues for the artists. They weren't paying a dime for anything, right? They had been brought in to perform. And then you jump the fence to the audience side where they're paying exorbitant prices, no water. Their fucking porta potty facilities are overflowing, pipes are broken, people are walking around in mud with shit and piss, and it's like it's almost classism right there going on. One side of the fence you got this, and on the other side of the fence you've got these artists walking around and they're getting everything handed to them. And
is that anything different than any
I was
going to
say the same thing.
Right?
It's like a metaphor.
Why all of a sudden?
It's a metaphor.
And let's be honest, the pipes broken and this and that was a result of the people that did it.
Right. No, I'm not saying that it's any different.
Break those pipes. They didn't come down there. The audience did that.
I'm saying there was a disconnect here, and that same disconnect exists in every concert environment, because You always play up to your artist. They're there to perform. That's why you brought them. That's why you paid for them, because they sell tickets. The name sells tickets. You bring people in. Of course, there's a disconnect. The fact that they brought it up in this documentary to showcase that the artist compound, there was clean water, everything was provided for them. And then you just very quickly step across the fence and they're showing you this very animalistic, primal Lord of the Flies situation. And it is a massive contrast right there in this one area.
But I guess the question I would have, and
so it's the band's fault, clearly.
Okay. Question answered.
Thank you.
I'm trying to be professional here and not argue with you.
I appreciate it. Go.
Band's fault. At what point, and I know we're going to touch on this, right? The water was there. The facilities were there. To some extent, maybe not where they needed to be.
Well, the key is to some extent.
The pipes didn't break themselves.
Well,
that's my point, right?
I would say it this way: what was provided wasn't adequate.
Right?
That is the key problem. Yeah. Not that the pipes got broken,
but breaking the pipes and destroying this and throwing trash everywhere doesn't make it any better.
You're right. It just exacerbated the problem, and you would look at most anyone and say, common sense tells me it's in our collective interest not to break that pipe. And
there was no common sense.
And there was
bathe in the fucking water troughs that are meant for drinking water. Right, common sense. And they interviewed Joel Patterson, who was the public health inspector, and his team was required to come in and test the waters every day.
Oh, yeah.
And very quickly, it was like, this water's not safe. But what can they do? At that point, it's like shit's growing in these bacteria.
What I would say, if I were in charge of the thing, you have an emergency meeting of the staff that's involved in pulling that off, and you fucking fix it.
Right.
You fix it. And
maybe you got to monitor contracts.
Maybe you got to say, I've got to get the porta potties coming here round the clock. Yeah, what do I got to do to make that happen?
That's a great point, Christian. Anyone else get the feeling when they were watching this, they were like, at multiple levels, people were just like, nah, give the fuck up. I'm done. Things break, fix them.
Right.
But it seemed like that never happened. Like no one ever said, hey, you know what? Except for that poor one woman who got into a cart and was trying to put a Band-Aid on a butthole by going around handing people trash bags. And I understand that one person's response of, I paid $150
Why am I
to be
picking
here.
Up trash?
Why am I cleaning up? Why am I going to spend my weekend cleaning up trash when I paid my hard-earned money to be here? I also get the other side where, do your part and clean up. If everyone does their part and cleans up their area, we're helping fix the problem, course correct the issue. I get that. But the problem still stands, which is I feel like on multiple levels, people just gave up. And they said, fuck it, and threw their hands in the air. 5
people aren't going to make a difference unless you have all, well over half of the people chipping in and doing that. Then, what am I going to do, right? And picking up trash. I can only pick up so much.
Yeah, sorry, Mac. I didn't mean to keep stuttering over the top of you, but that's the human nature part of this. We got through day one, right? I can get through another day of this, and we saw by day 3 there were some people like,
we're done.
But that was, probably in truth, I would have been the same way of like, okay, this was not what I expected, but freaking we're here. We paid. Let's see how tomorrow goes.
Oh no, I see.
It'll get better by
day 2, probably.
Yeah,
I probably would have been a day 3 tap out based on the lineup because I would have wanted
you're
to
a better
seal,
man than me, right?
Yeah, and that individual you're referring to, Haas, was Lisa Law, who coincidentally was at Woodstock '69. So, she watched Woodstock '69, and now she's watching 30 years later this debacle. And I think that was one of the reasons she was just like, let's do something about it. Let's go out and give trash bags. Let's have these people kind of embrace that peace, love, and music. And I think she very quickly was like, this is not 1969's Woodstock. This is
correct me if I'm wrong. I think her daughter was part of the
Pillar Law. She was
the
Michael
production
Lang's
or whatever.
Yes.
That's kind of interesting to see. The tie in there.
We always like clean answers, and sometimes they're there. But in this case, in my opinion, the producers had cast the die, and that's sort of where they stood for the remainder of the 3 days. Yeah. It's like, this thing is underway. Well, and they did no corrective action other than they said, okay, somebody came out and spoke to Fred Durst during his performance. I don't know that I saw in either documentary anything else that was done to make things better. It just kept going with these conditions, and the bands are the face of it. And I kind of, I want to believe, like I said, that, when you see a crisis, but I don't know that any of them necessarily flat out saw the crisis and said, I'm going to try and make it worse.
Well, I mean, come on. Even though one guy was like, you saw Fred Durst's ego and super ego in play, right? Like, you could clearly
fighting
see
with
that.
each other.
Right. And I mean, come on. Again, I don't believe Fred Durst or Limp Bizkit holds full responsibility here. I agree with you guys that the promoters of the show, they are ultimately in charge of how this plays out. But if you purposefully or intentionally set forward motions that lead to, felonious acts, I mean, come on, how can you not be held culpable?
Yeah, the problem you've got, Haas, is you're expecting a normal, decent human being to be on that stage leading that band.
You had Limp Bizkit and Fred Durst.
That would do that, right? Because if you put any one of us up there, I think we have the rationale behind it, enough to say, all right, well, and they kind of touched on it, and again, these are both documentaries. They are slighted to one side. You're getting, a narrow view of what happened. They talked to, it was Gavin Rosdale
from Bush,
with Bush, having to come on after Korn and be able to calm everybody down. I feel like, he seemed like he had the wherewithal to say, okay, we need to bring this down, now, and granted, his band, Bush, was not the same level that Korn or Limp Bizkit was. That was not their style. So it was a little bit easier. But, when you're asking people like Fred Durst or Kid Rock to be your moral compass, you've already lost at that point.
No. What I'm asking is a paid professional who's at that time my employee to do what I tell them to do, which is get this crowd back under control before shit gets out of hand and people get hurt.
Right.
And
the problem you have, and you said it yourself, and I'm going to throw you. You said professional.
Yeah, they are.
Neither of those people, they're artists, but they are not professional. If you want to use the loose term, sure, they're a professional at their job because they're getting paid for it. But as a human being, they are not professional.
By monetary standards, they're professional.
But I mean, if we distill this down to human nature, which is what was really in play. All right, so if I put myself in John Shear's perspective, in his headspace, I have orchestrated the event. I have booked these huge bands. I have given you the venue and the stage and a bigger audience you probably ever had in your life. That's I would imagine that's how he thinks of it, and I get that. But then you put yourself in the head of a Limp Bizkit, and you go, I have never had a crowd this big.
Right.
This is my chance to mark history with one of the most epic concerts that have ever happened.
He did to some extent.
Well, and I don't know. I know there's some interviews and other stuff that are floating out there, and I found it interesting in the Hulu concert when Limp Bizkit performed at Lollapalooza. He says before they sing break stuff, this isn't Woodstock 99. Fuck all that bullshit. Well, I thought that was a curious thing given where we are. But and this is why I say, like, if you look at these train wrecks in history, it's all independent decisions that led to a moment. They aren't one necessarily absolutely dictated what followed. It was an independent decision by an artist that had already been decided to be on that stage. And then they just decided to be who they were.
Right.
Because I think if they had not been, if you're in the audience, you're like, well, what the fuck?
What did I just pay for? Yeah. I think it was interesting, though, to see that, at least in the interview on the Netflix version, when they kind of grab Fred Durst coming off the stage, and they ask him a couple questions. And I think the second question basically leads him to the point of,
it's not our fault.
It's not our fault. And it was immediately where he went.
But right? That's funny because as a guilty individual, that'd be your first fucking
never mind.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Jonathan Davis said when he left the stage, he collapsed and had to get IVs because he gave it everything he had.
And at the end of the day, and I don't know if it's accurate or not, or how everything kind of fell out, but I guess in the documentary they said, we pulled Fred aside and said, hey, can you help bring the crowd down? Now, the way they cut it in the documentary is he comes back out and they roll right into break stuff. And he even talks about, I know you may have people problems, job problems, boss problems, me problems. Take all that rage and let it out. And they roll right into that song. And whether or not that's actually how it occurred in that order, who the fuck knows? But Mac, as you're saying, that's the guy you're allowing on the stage. You've given him the megaphone. You're asking him to control the crowd. And all he did was be who he was. You know, you wouldn't say the same thing about Anthony Kiedis and Red Hot Chili Peppers on Sunday night. But when shit started to devolve and he was pulled aside and asked, can you help calm the crowd down? What did they come out and play? And the fires had already broken out in the audience. They played fucking Fire by...
Which was such a dumb... Like, I don't
Jimi
know
Hendrix.
how do you let that happen, man?
But he's not a new metal.
Stop
They're
him.
not a new metal genre band. You know, they don't have a lot of anger and angst in the same way that you would kind of position Korn, Kid Rock, and Limp Bizkit. Yet they didn't come out and do anything to bring the crowd down.
But how
And I'm
do
not
you-
saying
I
it's
mean,
their
in fact, I
fault.
think the
In fact-
question is, how do you bring a crowd down at that point, right?
You can't.
I mean, you cannot control them. Really,
Well, you know, but hold on. You may not be able to bring them down necessarily, and I could probably disagree with you on that. But I'll tell you what you can do is not continue to incite them.
Right.
Well, I was going to say you try and steer it. Now, again, hindsight, right? I mean, you're Fred Durst, you're emotional. I've never had that many people looking at me expecting me to be the center of their. I don't know what that's like, but I could foresee if you said you got all this anger, you got all this blah 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 blah. It's time to let that shit out. But let's be respectful for the people that helped put this on.
Right. Let it out.
You know,
but do it
like
the right
some
way.
simple sentence like that, or some couple of sentences related to
do you think that
let's take care of
anybody-
each other or whatever, but that just simply wasn't said. Now, in maturity, I mean, think about the early days of Slipknot and probably what their concerts were like. And there's a clip where I think it might be Corey Taylor. I missed where he actually said it. I think it was another band performing with them at an event, but this was on the heels of the Astroworld, the Travis Scott concert, the trampoline. And he says, look, we get out there, we get after it, but at the end of the day, we love each other. And if somebody falls down, you pick them the fuck up. That recentered the collective mind of that mob, right? Or that audience, to just maybe snap them back a little bit to go, we're not animals.
No, but then Slipknot
This is a
turns around
human
and brings
being
it.
around me, you know?
Right.
But none of that happened.
But,
Right.
Well, and I think the important thing to note, to touch on what you just said, how do you convince them they're not animals when you're treating them like animals from
The promoter's
the
perspective.
promoter's
right. They're treating them
perspective,
that way.
the facilities. You can't say we're going to put you in shit mud, but you guys are all classy people.
But be
It's all right.
respectful.
That
Yeah.
1,000% agree.
Exactly. All right. So you know what? With that being said, Mac, thank you for the transition. We've talked about the promoters. We've talked about the bands. Let's move to the animals, the audience, the 400,000, by and large, the frat boy mentality that showed up on that weekend in upstate New York. And so, what is their level of culpability from walking through the gate on Friday? You might say, well, they showed up. They did what they should have. They bought their tickets. They brought their camping gear, their water, the things that they were supposed to, but then some of that was confiscated at the door. So, they walk through the gates thinking, okay, I'm going to still try to have a good weekend. There are vendors here. I can buy food. I can buy water. I can buy beer. Clearly drugs were available. There are porta potties. There's campgrounds. There's a hangar for a rave, 2 main stages. I mean, the stage, pun intended, but the stage is set for a good weekend. And then clearly shit went sideways and they reacted how they thought they were supposed to react.
Yeah. Each and every one of them. I shouldn't say each and every one of them, because I'm sure, it's a percentage, right? Not everybody, acted the same. I don't think it was the select few that the promoters wanted you to believe.
The 50 of them, 400,000.
I think it was a
50
much
bad apples.
larger portion than that. They are absolutely should be held accountable,
right?
Because I don't care. Okay, fine. You're in filth and facilities and this and that, and you're getting overcharged. It does not give you the right to start destroying property. It's just that's the way I feel about it. You know,
And-
you guys can feel otherwise, but it does not justify you being able to just do whatever the fuck you want to do and not care.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I got to tell you, I mean, it's not like it should surprise anybody, right? I mean, when you take young people that are filled with angst and disappointment and rage, and we've all been there, and we were those people at that time.
Why though? Again, I want to ask that question.
I asked myself when I was watching this, if I had been there, would I have participated? I mean, I'd like to think I have a strong moral compass, and I was raised well. And I asked myself, well, would I have been one of those people that would have been so pissed off and frustrated that I would have behaved in that way? I mean, obviously, there's certain lines I know I will never cross, but I wonder if some of
I've seen you angry.
yeah,
I've seen the angst.
that's what I mean, yeah, and that's
Especially
what
at that age.
Exactly, and I'm not saying that I'm not beyond reproach when it comes to what, and so I when I'm judging these people and their actions, I'm thinking to myself, can I understand? I can 100% understand where they were coming from. I'm not sure that I have it within my soul to go the distance that some of these folks went, because I've never been in a war zone, and quite frankly, I was a little offended and kind of taken back by the over dramatization of it. I mean, there's only one of us here that I imagine could attest to what that's like, and I'm thinking to myself, well, that's a bit far reaching. From a reporting standpoint, but I mean, I have to just be honest. When you look at the pictures and you look at the video, you think to yourself, I mean, if I didn't know any better and I was put in a bubble, I could see where someone might think that was a war zone.
Yeah. And I'm not going to ask Grinch if it was comparative to a war zone, because you're not nobody's actively trying to take your life, right?
Yeah. I mean, I always, just kind of smirk when I hear those comparisons, because I mean, it's like I understand in the vernacular where that comes from, things just destroyed. But at the same time, I'm like, there's just so much different, right? I mean, nobody was in there thinking they were going to get shelled or that the enemy was coming over the wire, right?
Grinch is like, I've been in a war zone and we had running water and we had TV and
we had it much better than Woodstock 99.
Yeah. We had showers.
We didn't have shit mud.
Yeah. I mean, to me, it starts like, I don't like people broadly. I think they kind of suck, but at the same time, if again, you put them in these conditions, and I'll continue to say, if you treat like people like animals, they're going to act like it, and you shouldn't be surprised. And I do believe that happened. And I also believe from the onset, they were seen as a source of revenue and not as human beings.
Right,
in terms of the care, there were some basic and sometimes legally required things in place to make the event go. But beyond that, nobody was in the mix with their finger on the pulse that was in a position to do something about it. To say, like, look, we're going to postpone, or we're going to hold this band in place while we address the crowd. We're going to have somebody out. We're going to talk to them about what we're going to fix, and I know it's only 3 days. It's hard to fix really big problems in that amount of time. I get it. But when you do nothing, this crowd has nothing to direct its anger towards. So it was like this faceless thing behind walls that had, in their mind, set the conditions for why things were so bad. And I still say, like, that whole, it's like I get it in the sense of they were trying to find a cultural connection to why everybody was so angry. But at the same time, if I were in the room, with someone, I'd be like, what the fuck are you so angry about?
That's it, right? That was a question I asked, right?
Where
was all this anger coming from?
It's the same. It's kind of the same thing I feel about, and I want to try to understand it now, because ever since Duke has said what he said about understanding, like, I think it's an important question. But I just keep coming back to, what were you so angry about? What did you think this was going to accomplish? But then you see race riots and you see other things. It's a release of energy.
Do you think, though, Grinch, that this was, I guess the anger was because they felt like they were entitled to something that they were not getting, right? We heard that term, we heard that term a lot, right? And we heard it a lot during that show, was entitlement. Yeah. And so they felt like, I'm entitled to these specific things, and they're not there.
Well, and I think Grinch touched on
because
that.
of that, I'm going to riot now.
Yeah, Grinch did touch on that. They were entitled. They were entitled to proper drinking water and clean bathrooms and abilities to be able to shower and to be able to protect themselves from the element. And they expected they were going to get first aid and care and attendance. Yeah, there were a lot of things that they should have been entitled to, and they should have expected they should have been entitled to. I think the problem was not only were they not getting those, but then they were feeling entitled to other things that they most assuredly should not have been felt entitled to. Right.
And
like
obviously,
groping women or raping women or accosting women or, some of those more primal behaviors.
And that was one of the things that was brought forth in both documentaries was the level of nudity there was kind of unprecedented. People were just walking around naked,
some of that
that level of entitlement very quickly cropped up was that, oh, well, if you're walking around naked, that kind of gives me open invitation to do what I want, which most assuredly it does not. And
I think we can all confirm that based on walking 100%. Around our house.
Well,
and what's frustrating is we are that age demographic of that time frame, right? And so
I think I would say we're a little bit older though.
We're not 23.
No,
24,
we were right.
23, 24 was the demographic.
We were right in the
wheelhouse. Is that really okay? I was thinking the demographic for them would have been a little bit younger.
We know someone that we graduated with who went to Woodstock '99.
No, they said in both documentaries they talked about anywhere between 22 and 24 was the base demographic for that festival. I had just turned 23. You all had been 23 going on 24. So we were the ideal demographic targeted for that show.
I was just trying to tee that up so that you could prove you were the youngest of the group again. That's
I am.
That whole thing was
I appreciate it. I don't need your help.
Not according to that Waffle House waitress though.
No. I said youngest, not youngest looking.
That's right.
I mean,
but I am. But thanks,
the showing the Girls Gone Wild, which I understand was a thing at the time. Showing the clip of Clinton and Monica Lewinsky, I was like,
but it's like they were trying to justify.
I'm not sure I understand what we're doing here.
Yeah.
I felt like they were trying to like carte blanche make a statement about toxic masculinity before that was really a defined term. And maybe, I don't know, I would just need to hear more. Like, tell me really why you think that was the underlying problem in all this.
And I think it's interesting to see because you see, you hear all about this whole Me Too movement and everything. And like, I'm not trying to downplay it by any stretch of the imagination, but you can look at this and certainly look at it and say, okay, well, I can see where we've swung all the way, to the polar extreme to some extent of trying to course correct.
Yeah,
Haas is coming back in.
Haas and Haas.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it was. I didn't think it was well explained, or maybe it was like you're just supposed to get it, and I didn't. And maybe somebody would go exactly, and it's not that I'm not trying. I'm just. It was a factor, okay, and you assembled a lot of people that were of similar mind. It appeared, and. I mean, I'll go out on a crazy limb here and say that's how you get a Capitol riot. You orchestrate a group in such a way. Now, I don't think it was preordained in this case. I think, the Capitol riot had more machinations behind the scenes to set those conditions.
Easy now. Let's stay in our lane.
But with this concert, you just put a lot of like-minded people that started to feed off each other, and there weren't. I would still be curious to know what percentage really did all the damage. If you said 400,000 people were there.
Yeah, I'd like to just know what the breakdown was as far as, white males, white females, minorities, what was that? What did that look like as well?
I mean, literally 1,000 people could have made it look that bad or less.
Right.
Well, when you say 10%, 10% is next to nothing in terms of the majority, right? But that's still 40,000 people is 10%. You go 10%, that seems like such a small percentage. Yeah, but it's 40,000 fucking people if that were the number.
Well, that was like, is it John Shearer?
John Scher.
When he was like, well, 400,000 people is like the size of a city. And like, what's 4 rapes? 4 rapes in a city of that size is like, that's statistically normal. And I'm like,
I don't think we need to harp on what a douchebag
that's not
that
the
guy
point,
was. I think we
jackass.
lost.
I mean, that statement is what continued to solidify in my mind. He just saw it as a source of revenue.
Where he needs to be.
That
upper
man
cut.
sleeps perfectly well at night.
Yeah.
He does.
In his, $10,000 Tempur-Pedic bed.
I mean, and in some cases, I get you paid the money, but that doesn't entitle you to do what you did. It
Yep.
doesn't.
Well, and I think the biggest problem I have with some of the entitlement was, okay, fine, you paid this money, and you feel like you're not getting the things that you're entitled to as far as running water, food, this, that, and the other. But you look at the reported gropings and rapes that happened. None of that should have had anything to do with the promoters.
Agreed.
That in my mind,
What?
should have never happened.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. I agree. Sorry.
You didn't think I was going down the path of saying that was okay, did you?
No, not that it was okay.
Because if I did, I worded that completely wrong.
I had to digest the
because I know
sentence
you
for a
better
second.
than that. I didn't think you were going in that direction at all.
Okay, good.
No. Please don't misunderstand. I think way more of you than that, sir.
Well, that's your fault. So
yeah, well, and I'll bear that responsibility down the line.
yeah, I think you have to look at it from two perspectives, right? I want to almost say somewhat understand and justify the anger to the production company and the festival itself. I'm not saying it was right, but then you look at the other flip side of how they treated the women and everything, which again was part of what that's why we're talking about. It was part of what was brought up in the documentary. There was no reason for that whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I disagree with how the producers approached it. I understand it was designed to maximize profits. That's capitalism, I think they created the conditions, but that does not mean I agree with anything that followed. I don't want to be very clear about that. I mean, I still look at, I know Moby used the term troglodytes. And maybe he does mean that small subsection. I just,
right.
It seemed like he was broad brushing that.
Well, it's Moby, right? You have to take it with a grain of salt.
Come on, I got you're a little bitter, but I mean, it just shows that in a crowd like that, it's what I still love joking about. No single raindrop thinks it's the cause of the flood.
Right. It's all part of the bigger picture. One of the things I found in a Rolling Stone article was there were 400,000 people over the 4 days of the festival, but only 250,000 tickets were sold, which means obviously 150,000 managed to get in.
Yeah.
So
a question I have that I just kind of thought about that I'd like to throw out there. So we know that, things weren't great Friday night, right? There was some anger from what we saw in the video. Obviously none of us were there. Clearly Saturday, they seemed to go way off the rails with, the Kid Rock, Limp Bizkit, some of the other stuff. And then, everything else that was going on and continued to do so Sunday into, what everybody saw on the news and the different things with the fires that were set. At what point, and Haas, maybe this is a question for you to some extent, from a legal standpoint, should they have been held accountable for not trying to shut this shit down earlier, right? Saying, look, this is over. You guys are destroying property on Saturday. We can see this is getting out of hand. And clearly they weren't going to do that, right? Because they were there to make money. But, I mean, what's the legal ramifications for, continuing to allow that to happen, if any?
Well, I mean, you're culpable, right? Because I mean, ultimately there's an agreement, right? When you buy a ticket to attend a venue like that, there's certain expectations, reasonable expectations that you have of what's going to be provided. I've got to imagine, and I unfortunately, I apologize. I was curious about this and didn't have time to do the research for it, but I was curious to see how many lawsuits were actually filed against the promoters and whether or not how those turned out, because I've got to believe multiple lawsuits were filed.
Well, and I think that was kind of my follow-up question, right? Because I think Grinch mentioned, and these are just the numbers we found, right? I think there were 4 reported, and I want to stress reported rapes. Obviously, we're sure there could have been many more that were unreported. I think we confirmed there were 3 deaths. you would think out of those 7 events right there alone,
Yep.
there should have been some sort of repercussions and lawsuits brought.
Yeah, and I mean, Haas helped me out on this, but I think when you were talking about that chain, I think the other term for that is proximate cause.
Proximate cause, causation is the same thing. They're basically interchangeable.
And so the irony, I guess, in all of this is for most of those people that, are kind of the focus of this thing, meaning in the audience, they could be legally charged for damage to property.
Absolutely.
Because
100%.
they have no defense other than saying the conditions were such and such, but that isn't illegal.
Yeah,
and
one
I
of
agree
the
with
one of
that,
the only
how
main.
Do you go back and press those charges, right? I mean, obviously,
Well,
there's some
bro,
footage
there was a lot of footage of that shit.
But...
I mean, you can go back and ID people. I mean, it happens in rioting and looting all the time.
No,
I mean, it's happened in the January 6th
I think at the
stuff,
time
right?
it would have been harder to
sure.
identify people.
Right,
and so what's your statute of limitations at that point? But
right.
Well, and if it's not in your legal interest, frankly, you just move on, because back to who would bring the charges.
I mean, technically you'd have to have that brought in that county, probably.
I mean, I'd be willing to bet Shear and those guys, they just wrote that shit off and moved on.
Yeah, sure.
And
they've never looked back
mirror as quick as possible.
They paid off the people whose property was destroyed, and they just kept rolling, because it's like you said. What'd you say? 60 million is the low end, right? That's the low end.
Yeah, I mean, if they were selling tickets, and that doesn't include the vendor shares and all of that, all of the money that was made, that's simply off ticket sales.
That's still the low end, right? That's the low end of what was probably made is 60 million. And what do you think it probably cost them to put that show together and pay the artists? 10, 15?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, they paid $1,000 to resod it after.
A lot of it was probably grants and stuff, so they could pull off the event because it's in the city's interest.
Right.
And then you do the vendor. I mean, there's ad dollars, and you're paying the talent and all that stuff, and the crew. I mean, I'm sure in the wash, they still came away looking pretty good.
I took an average, and $150 for a advanced ticket, $180 for an at-door ticket. That Rolling Stone said only 250,000 tickets were sold, not 400,000. So that's 42,500,000 if they sold on average at $170 per ticket, 250,000 tickets. No food, no beer, no nothing. That's straight ticket sales.
None of the other add-in stuff.
Well,
like how much?
They don't
how much
see
do you
any
think
of that money,
MTV? What was that deal worth?
I don't know, because
you didn't count in the pay-per-view.
The pay-per-view, right? $60. What is this? $60 for the 3 days?
$59.99.
Yeah.
So
I have a question, and I want to ask this. Well, I want to ask this because I feel like you're getting ready to wrap us up here, and I understand that because I ain't editing this shit.
But you said,
I say a lot of stuff.
Legal says.
Nobody listens to me.
Legal says.
So I want to go around the room and just kind of, and I'll throw this out there for everybody to kind of mull on. Do you think there will ever be another Woodstock festival?
No.
All right, so I'm getting no.
Well,
I think when you've got the Bonnaroos and the Coachellas,
it's not the same anymore.
Yeah, and the Novas. When you've already got these established entities that have their own brand where the shit ain't fucking jacked up.
How do you dig this brand out of the, again, pun intended, out of the shitter?
How do you dig this brand out of the train wreck?
Well, and why do you not go to Fire
and
Festival
why would you?
instead?
Oh, good point. Yeah, you can
see, we didn't even touch on
and
that.
it's like an LLC. I mean, you just call it something different anyway.
Right.
If you were to try.
Well,
it's.
So then let's ask this one final question. Go back to 99. The four of us. How many would have gone to this?
I wanted to.
I think. Hold on. Knowing what I know now,
you can't
absolutely
know that.
not.
You can't know that.
At the time, yes, I probably would have wanted to go to this, and would have gone. If somebody had come up and said, here's a free ticket, I'm in.
Because what were the dates? It was
June 20th to 23rd, right?
Yeah. I mean, I mean, this is personality driven, not consequence driven of the logistics of getting to New York for a 3-day festival. I didn't have the money for that shit.
July 22nd through July 25th.
Well, that's what I say. If somebody had come up and given you a free ticket and said, here's a ticket, we're going to get you there, we're going to give you a tent,
of course,
would you have gone? Yeah.
If I didn't have the responsibility of a wife and 2 kids
at the time, you would have been fine with the tent. Now it's a camper. I understand.
I mean, if not knowing what you know, to be able to go to something like that would have been great. But of course, knowing what you know, you're like, And we've joked about it now. I won't go to a 3-day festival now. Not at my age. I'm not camping out. Fuck all that.
I mean, Jewel alone would have been worth the price of admission. So
Willie Nelson.
Well, and that was the other
No?
thing in the
Nobody?
HBO version of only these many female artists. I was like, I'm gonna again ask, what's the point you're trying to make?
Right.
Well,
I think it would have been better if there were more.
Well, I think the point is
because that might have actually been more fuel on the fire. Actually,
No, I think the point being that you were still catering to a specific audience member. That's the point I think they were trying to make with that,
right.
Possibly Grinch, is that, you know, you were bringing in these bands that were clearly going to bring in a specific, you know,
demographic
fan,
Yeah.
right? And it wasn't going to be your peace, love, and happiness hippie spin doctors, you know,
Well,
fan.
I mean, I'll ask, you know, a funny question, I guess, in that if you had taken out a Rage, a Korn, a Limp Bizkit, and just said the lineup is what it is, otherwise,
I think, yeah, I mean, because and that's the point I made.
Well, like
you look
throwing
back
the
at
wallflowers, you know.
No, but you look back at '94, you still
Maybe
had
some
Metallica.
Take.
You had Red Hot Chili Peppers. You had Green Day. I mean, like I said, you had some bands that you know were of the heavier ilk, I guess, and that didn't go off the rails.
yeah.
So
I mean,
was it the bands or was it the fans? I don't know.
Promoters.
well,
The
how about?
promoters?
I mean, how about
Or a combination of all
Offspring
three.
using a bat to bash the Backstreet
NSYNC.
Boys? I mean, we talk about exciting
Backstreet, whatever it was,
pride.
The Offspring. Yeah.
Wyclef Jean doesn't get any smoke for what he did. I mean,
Yeah. I agree. At the end of the day, we could go on for another 2 hours and debate this. I think we all agree. You lay responsibility clearly at the feet of the promoters. It was a lack of understanding of who they were bringing to the table. It was a lack of infrastructure. Yes, your fan base was an issue, but if you understood the bands, you'd have understood the fan base. You know,
right. If you say the buck stops here, you at the end of the day put this thing on.
right?
Yeah.
The consequences fall to you.
You contracted out your vendors. You contracted out your waste management. I mean, all of the things that are going to define your infrastructure from a habitable standpoint, you contracted those out to the lowest bidder and just
I
hope
was
they
going to
were
say, I
able to
think
pull it
Grinch
off.
was a test, right? Those all
Yeah.
typically go to the lowest bidder, right?
And so Grinch, you said it multiple times. You treat people like animals. How can you be surprised that they then act like those animals? And so that's where we are at the end of that 3-day weekend. It was a shit-tastic situation. They did bring in uniformed police officers to quell the riots, break it up, and then spent 3 weeks cleaning up the site and kind of putting things back together. But, you know, were there a large majority of that 250 to 400,000 people that enjoyed themselves? Probably. Were there a handful of bad apples, whatever that percentage is? 100% absolutely. You know, condoning the behavior towards women, absolutely, you know, it's ridiculous. And, you know, I think, again, we all have girls. So it's like to think if my kid was going to that and that's what they would be subjected to, I'd be fucking furious.
Well, and to that point, I mean, even in our basis conditions, I firmly believe, and this is where I think we mentally cannot connect with this crowd. Just because I saw a topless woman doesn't mean I'll be like,
Gotta grab it.
I am
Movie,
now
let me
able
touch it.
Doesn't-
or
doesn't
entitled
give
to
me
be
any-
able to touch you, invade
Right.
your personal space.
Yeah.
It's bullshit.
Right.
It's
Personal space is still personal space.
No
Without
matter
my
what.
permission, you don't have right to enter that space.
Right.
Regardless of whether I'm clothed or not.
And at the end of the day, gentlemen, as always, I appreciate y'all being here and bringing your fresh perspective to every topic we bring to the table. This one was no different. Now, this has been 2 music ones back to back, which, you know, I'm not bothered by, and I hope our listeners aren't bothered by, because we just enjoy talking about the topic, and we'll see what next week has to bring. But I think consensus is you lay this responsibility at the feet of the promoters, John Scher, Michael Lang. Michael Lang's gone. So will there ever be another Woodstock? No, I don't think they ever try to revitalize this brand if they know what's good for them. They leave this one where it belongs, in the past, let it go. Because, you know, in 7 years, you're going to be at the 60th anniversary of Woodstock and you go, oh, well, we could do it again. Some jerk off may consider it. Hopefully somebody says, hey, no. Yeah, and then you just leave Mac muted and we keep moving. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, as always, check out our website at aspiriteddebate.com. All of the drinks that we try here. You can have my A Spirited Debate Brazilian lemonade. You can have Max PB&J, you know, or You can just have an IPA from Southern Pines if a beer is your thing. It's totally up to you. We don't care. But you can check out all of the drinks that we have here. Drop us a line. Let us know what you think of the show. If there's a topic you'd like us to debate, you can always roll over to our email at the4horsemen@aspiriteddebate.com. Drop us a line there. Give us the topic you'd like us to debate. A Spirited Debate is here. Season 3. The train rolls on. Gentlemen, I love you. We will do this again very soon. Looking forward to it. And thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
The views, information, or opinions expressed during the A Spirited Debate podcast series or any affiliated podcast are solely those of the hosts or guests involved and do not represent those of people, institutions, or organizations that the hosts or guests may or may not be associated with in a professional or personal capacity, unless explicitly stated. While guests are invited to listen, listeners acknowledge that they are not being provided professional advice from the podcast or its guests. The content within the parameters of A Spirited Debate podcast series or any affiliated podcast are for entertainment and educational purposes only. Any views or opinions are not intended to malign any religion, ethnic group, club, organization, company, or individual.